Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you like this podcast, you will love my new anthology called Moms Don't Have Time to Have Kids. Check it out, and you'll hear from 49 authors about all sorts of things moms don't have time to do. All the authors have been on this podcast. Also, check out my TikTok with Zibby and Tracy, my other podcast, Sex Talk with Zibby and Tracy. Check out Moms Don't Have Time to Write on Medium. And of course, my new publishing company called Zibby Books. And now back to our daily author interview site and a quick hello from some of my kids. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Enjoy the show. Lisa Unger is the author of Last Girl Ghosted. She is a New York Times and internationally best-selling author with books published in 30 languages and millions of copies sold worldwide. She is widely regarded as a master of suspense. Last Girl Ghosted is her latest novel, but Unger's critically acclaimed novels have been featured on best book lists from The Today Show, Good Morning America, Entertainment Weekly, People, Amazon, Goodreads, and many others. She has been nominated for or won numerous awards, including the Strand Critics Hammett Prize, Macavity, ITW Thriller, and Goodreads Choice. In 2019, she received 2 Edgar Award nominations. Her short fiction has been anthologized in the Best American Mystery and Suspense, and her nonfiction has appeared in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, NPR, and Travel and Leisure. She lives on the west coast of Florida with her family. Welcome, Lisa. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss Last Girl Ghosted.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. And, can I just start off by saying thank you for everything you do for books and authors. You're such an amazing writer, publisher, entrepreneur. It's like such an amazing gift that you're giving to people to reconnect them to books, because it is such a true thing that, for writers, especially, like, all writers are readers first. It's that reader joy that makes us want to write in the first place. And so sometimes as writers, and then I know, like, as moms, you can kind of lose touch with that really, like, joyful part of your life. So it's such an amazing gift that you're giving everybody to reconnect them to that space.
Oh, thank you. And yes, of course you can start with that.
Is it okay to start with that?
Don't stop. Let's just do that the whole time.
Okay, let's just talk about you.
Yeah, great. Perfect. Thank you, Lisa. That is really sweet. And I really appreciate it. This all comes from such a place of love, just like you said. A huge reader, and I just love, this whole thing has been so much fun. Yeah.
I mean, we all come to the business for that reason, right? Like everybody comes to this for love, right? Like all writers and, editors, publishers, everybody comes from that place of, like, that moment where you open a book and you read those first few sentences and you're like, this is going to be so amazing. Like everybody comes from that place. And I think that's why it's such a, joyful. It can be challenging, but mostly it's a joyful way to, to live and to earn a living in a joyful business. And, there's so much, like, excitement all the time for, like, that, that new book. And it's kind of it's a blessing to be able to be in this industry.
It's so true. And your mom is a librarian, right? Did she sort of inculcate this in you from a very early age?
She definitely did. She definitely did. My mom is, like, a great lover of story, a librarian, of course, but also, she loved, all kinds of, movies, theater, but my dad was an engineer. And so he never wanted to do any of those things. Like, he never wanted to go to the movies. He never wanted to go to the theater. So she just took me everywhere, even when things were, like, sort of wildly inappropriate for me. She just, I just thought, it would go over your head, like whatever you didn't understand, it wouldn't matter. I was like, I'm not sure that's the way it works now that we know a little bit more about child psychology. But, so we went to all these different things together. And there was, my dad, even though he's an engineer, like, also a huge reader of nonfiction. So we always had shelves and shelves and shelves of books. And there was absolutely no censorship whatsoever. If I could reach it, I could read it. Like, nobody cared. Nobody was watching. And so I've just been this crazed reader, like this literary omnivore kind of all my life, like reading wildly, like across genre, all the time, and just wanting that big story, that big sort of epic purple story, deep, raw, emotional, scary, usually, like, always have had that, like, draw to the, like, dark side. So yeah, I mean, definitely grew up reading always.
Can I just say that being a literary omnivore is the best expression I've heard in a long time? I'm literally going to write that down because I love that. That is the coolest. Yeah. Well, wait, that sounded amazing. I mean, I want to talk about your book, but
yes,
like, have you had that experience with a book yourself where you have felt that passionately about it? Like, did that happen? Does it happen all the time? Like, can you think of books that do that for you or that have done that for you?
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting that you asked that question because, like, it is actually an occupational hazard as a writer that you have to read so much. You read so much from, for other people. You read, I mean, things that you want to read, but things that you're doing, like you get, I have a stack of galleys for blurbs, and there's a lot of books that I read for research that, I want to read, but it's like, it's not that kind of, it doesn't necessarily always engender that type of reader joy. And so I was on stage a couple of years ago. I mean, who knows when it was now, because with the pandemic, like the time has just like become this, I don't know, house of mirrors, but I was on stage with Laura Lippman, and we started talking about blurbing and stuff. And she said that, she had really worked hard to preserve her life as a reader, that she really made sure that she was always reading things that she loved and wanted to read. And I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if I've done that. And so I really started to, I turned back at that. Oh, there's my Labradoodle. Sorry.
My lab is on the couch. You might not be able to see
You can't see him because he's couch colored.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, I wonder if I had really done that. And so I started to just go back to trying to find that reader, at least, every month, to have a book that I picked just because, I'm excited. I want to read that book. So yeah, I've really, sort of gone back there. The one that I read most recently that really did that, really transported me, in that way that books do, Matrix by Lauren Groff. It was, completely, another universe, another world. And yet, such deep, rich themes, brilliant characterization, just very atmospheric, just felt immediately transported to this world that is, utterly other. And that's like, that's the gift of reading, right? To open doors to, every other universe.
I just had that, most recently with like an alternate sort of life that you sink right into, or you like fall, I don't know. It's like Tessa Hadley wrote a book called Free Love. I mean, not to say that your book wasn't amazing, but like in terms of, we can talk about your book too, but Tessa Hadley's Free Love, you open like right away, it's almost like a play. It's like you open onto the kitchen and dining room of this upscale home in London in the 1960s with the young mother like at her vanity sort of getting ready and with like all the scenes set. And then she ends up like leaving her husband. And anyway, I don't know. There's something sometimes about the setting itself.
Yes.
That it's like, okay, I am in this like stage.
I'm in this space.
Yeah, like in this space.
Feel it, smell it, hear it. I'm there. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Of course, with your book, I was also in a bar that was very crowded and unpleasant. And then I was walking across the Brooklyn Bridge, and then I was in the car, and now I'm on like the corner of Broadway and 79th Street, and like, I don't know, all over the place. So thank you for that. I know. I was like, I was just on 79th Street. I'm like, perfect. Okay, let's go back to your book for a second. Okay. Last Girl Ghosted. This is your this is your 19th novel, right?
This is number 19, which is crazy. It's crazy to say. Yeah, number 19. That's right.
19th novel. Tell listeners what this book is about and how on earth do you keep coming up with so many plots and how do you?
I have no idea. I wish I knew. It's just the way I've been doing this since I was a kid, so it's just kind of the way my brain works. I think I've just been writing for so long that my brain, writing and reading for so long that I've just kind of internalized the form of the novel, and it's just like constantly. There's always constantly something percolating. In the case of Last Girl Ghosted, when we open up, we meet Ren Greenwood, and she's an advice columnist. She's somebody who's come from a very dark past. She's kind of white knuckled her way into the light, and she's built a life for herself that she loves. She does this work of trying to help people through trauma and darkness, and it's a catharsis for her. She thinks that this is, it's part of the way she's healed herself. And so she's pretty happy, but her best friend Jax is like, you don't have anybody. You're not meeting anybody. You're not dating, you're alone. And she's kind of okay with that, but she sort of gives into her friend, and her friend pushes her into the world of online dating.
Torch is not a real site, is it?
It's not. No.
Okay. I'm so out of it.
It's my made up. My made up site.
I didn't think so, but you never know.
Right. You never know. It could be something you've never heard of.
Yeah.
And so she kind of has these, she has a few underwhelming encounters, and then she meets Adam. And when she meets him, she falls hard. She falls really hard. And partially that's, her naivety, her lack of connection, but she falls for him really, really hard. And then after a particularly romantic evening, he makes a request. He says, "Tell me something about yourself that you have never told anyone." And she does. And the next day, Adam disappears. And his social media sites are gone, and his cell phone has been disconnected. And the place he lives, or the place she thought he lived, is just a vacation rental. And Ren is gutted. She is just wrecked. And she then, when a private detective shows up on her doorstep, she learns that she was not the first girl to fall for Adam, and that all these other girls have disappeared. And so instead of kind of, licking her wounds and being glad worse things didn't happen to her, she decides that she's going to chase his dark digital trail into his past and into her own. And that is Last Girl Ghosted.
Wow. Very cool. Of course, it starts off with this very sad moment, right? With Mia and losing her, like in this, I mean, I'm not giving it away because it's the opening, but where she loses her mom and like curls up with her on the kitchen floor against her chest. I mean, that's so sad. And how, of course, and then you go into her, addiction and recovery from addiction and where she is now. And this is all in the very first moment. So immediately we're like hooked, like what's going to happen? What happens to Mia, Princess Bella, the whole thing. And like that sort of mother loss. And you even just the way you write about grief.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all, as mothers, we all kind of connect to that. Like, like everybody, everybody feels like, oh, the worst thing that could happen to you would be to lose your child. But, there's another layer to that too. Like the biggest thing we fear is them losing us.
Yes.
Right. Yep. Like that's more, that's almost more frightening. And, I feel like I've always kind of, wandered into those dark alleys, like the thing that, I always think that there are things that I'll never write about. And then and then I wind up writing about them, just because, I kind of consider myself a little bit of a spelunker. I'm kind of shimmying into the dark spaces of the human psyche, and that includes addiction and grief and trauma and, mental illness and all that. Like those are it's my number one curiosity and fascination is the human mind and what makes us who we are. And so I tend to go into these sort of dark spaces, but always, I hope headed towards the light.
I mean, who was I just talking to who was saying that most writing is an exercise in trying to cope with some sort of pain in some way? And particularly for memoirists, that's why you're writing a memoir. But, this was Jenny Pentland yesterday. Anyway, but it's true. I feel like it's all exercises in working through our stuff. And I think about that all the, like yesterday, literally I had to be like, you cannot die. You cannot die. Your kids need you. You have to slow down. Like, it's going to be okay. Don't let yourself die.
I know. I mean, it's such a weird thing. And I feel like it's like something that people don't ever really talk about, like that kind of that layer of like, and then also just mortality in general is not something we ever really wanted to face. But now as a culture, we've had to face it in this really new way. Like everybody kind of knew in an intellectual way that, you're pretty much out of control, right? Like you can get very good at thinking that you control your life, especially if you're a certain type of person. And, you can get very good at thinking that you're in charge of what's happening. And then all of a sudden, like, if you think about everything you worried about in January of 2019, not one of those things was a global pandemic that would disrupt your life and the life of your children if you're a parent for the next, 2.5 so far years. Right. And so like, we kind of get into that like idea that we're, or started to face that idea that we're really not in control the way our modern lives have conspired to make us believe we are.
Yes.
And I think it is a lot of why I, like all my life, I've been very fascinated with that type of thinking and those kind of dark spaces. And I do turn to the page to metabolize darkness for sure. And I think that a lot of people turn to thrillers and crime fiction for the same reason.
I love that too. I turn to the page to metabolize darkness. That's so good. You like speak in these like awesome, I mean, I hope you should write, you should like put it on a pillow or something. Anyway.
Yeah. Good idea. I turn to the page to metabolize darkness. I'm not sure how many people would buy that pillow, but maybe more than you think.
Most crime writers. Maybe it's not it's like a gag gift for the Crime Writers Association.
That's right. We just give it to each other.
Give it to each other.
Exactly.
Secret Santas or something. Everybody gives the same pillow.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think it's interesting because like Lee Child, like sort of famously gives this talk about, about the thriller being the first story ever told, and I had this conversation with a friend of mine who's an artist. And we talked about, like the first story ever told was, a painting on a wall of a cave. And, and these thrillers that we tell ourselves, the stories that we tell ourselves around the fire at night, it's about how, the hero bested the enemy, or, the hunter felled the beast that feeds the community for the winter. And it's like, you tell each other these stories to make everybody feel braver in the dark. And then when you turn to a thriller or crime fiction, it's like, it's all there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, there's darkness, there's some type of justice, maybe not exactly in my book, maybe not exactly the type of justice you might be looking for, but some type of justice is going to be served, even if it's just like poetic justice. And, that is not so in the real world. And so it gives us this place to be scared, to be intense, to be like very involved in our character and what's going to happen to her or him, and then resolved like in a way that hopefully is satisfying. And so that, certainly we don't get that very much from life, right?
Yes. Can say that again. Oh my gosh. So wait, tell me how, so the ideas are continually percolating. You're there with like your pickaxe and, a belay, and like ready to dive into, little headlight, ready to dive into the dark side. What do you do? Do you outline, like, what's your process? I know it's a boring question, but I'm actually fascinated by it. So
so usually there's like a germ, right? There's one thing, like a seed. Like for me, like reading, writing, and researching is a continuum, right? Like it's a never ending thing, like the research is going to inspire the writing, is going to inspire more research, is going to inspire more reading, is going to inspire more writing. Like that's kind of my life as it is. And, and then sometimes I have these conversations, like in the case of Last Girl Ghosted, I had a conversation with a really young friend of mine, and she was talking about how, she was talking about the dating apps, right? Like for me, like, I'm 105 years old. I've been married for a million years. So like, I've never been on a dating app. Like I went, like when I was first dating 21 years ago, before I met my husband, there were just like the online dating things, like they had just kind of started. And so that's what I kind of had my experience with. So I kind of already had a sense of like kind of the potential for it to be just very soulless and strange. Right. But it's a norm now. Right. And so she was talking about how, you just scroll and scroll and scroll. It's the next one, it's the next one, it's the next one. And she's like, how do you ever know if you've chosen the right person? And it just struck me as such a broken question. It struck me as like, okay, well, you're not shopping for a toaster. You're not like, love is a head trip, right? It's not a algorithm, right? And so she was like, so we kind of had this conversation. She goes on like to say, well, then if they turn up in your life, then, and they're not what you think, right? Like and who is like, compares to their social media feed, like they're not who you thought they were, or you're not who they thought you were. It's just so easy to ghost that person because there's no close tie connection. Like you're not going to wind up sitting next to your Tinder date's grandmother at church on Sunday, right? So there's no external reason for you to be respectful, be kind, right? So that was like the thing that got me, that was the germ that got me interested. It's not so much that I was interested in online dating. It was that I was interested in how online dating rewrites the way we relate to each other. How does it rewrite this very ancient pursuit of finding a mate which is essentially what it is, right? So that's really kind of what interests me. And then I started doing my research, and it usually leads me to a swath of research over like documentaries and reading articles and finding books and maybe somebody to talk to, depending on how deep I want to go. And then if it all connects with something that's bigger, I think some bigger question, then I start hearing a voice or voices. And I follow those voices through the manuscript. I don't have an outline. I have a very vague idea of what my book is about. I have a very strong connection to the voice or voices that I have in my head. I'm very interested in them and what they have to say. And then the story and the characters evolve for me on the page, much in the same way they will for my reader later. Like they reveal themselves to me in layers. And I've just written every single book that way.
Wow.
Which I'm sure there's an easier way to do it, but it's a lot of 3 a.m. wake ups, because it's a very subconscious process. So it's always like kind of going. And then like, there's a lot of times where we just kind of wake up at 3. I'm like, oh my God, that's it. And so then I'm up, working. So that's kind of how it works for me. And, I've never worked from an outline. I feel like if I knew how the book was going to end, that there'd be no engine for me. Like that's like I'm involved in the story the same way I write for the same reason that I read, because I want to know what's going to happen to these people who are living in my head. And so, that's the joy for me. That's the reader joy in the writing for me. Like that's how, that's the full engine of how I just keep writing and writing and writing because I'm just in love with stories.
Well, I know you're on your 20th book, right? Writing your 20th, or you're finished?
It's done. It's done. Number 20. It's done. Yeah.
Well, so have you thought ever about some sort of like reunion tour where all the characters of all the books kind of get together and have a party?
Like in a book?
Yeah. In a book.
That would be that's a great idea, but that would be like a scary party because I have some very dark.
It would be maybe it's like a prison you have to go to.
It's like Arkham Asylum or something.
Right?
Like,
yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
Like, why don't you try it?
That's a great idea.
I want someone to try something cool with characters and like across books and across time and like what would it be like?
I've done a couple of things where, people have asked me to like interview one of my characters, like in writing, and I've done a couple of things like that. And that's always like a very interesting exercise, because they do live and breathe for me. Yeah. Like they're as real to me as most of the people in my life, and I feel that like, deep connection to them. And then some characters have their story and then, they're gone. And then some characters just stay and they show up. Like in Last Girl Ghosted, Jones Cooper is a character that turned up first in Fragile and it dwells in this my fictional town, The Hollows, where a number of my books are set. And so he just frequently just kind of turns up. And I feel like, like he's here because I need somebody to like manage the crisis. Like I need a stabilizing influence. And he just kind of shows up and, fixes the things that are broken or gives this kind of very like, practical Luddite perspective on, the mess that people happen to be in at the moment. And so he kind of turns up and things. And then, there's a number of characters that I maybe hasn't turned up, but I still think about them. I still think about, well, what if, even characters that are no longer with us, one in particular, I feel like she's still around. So I'm just trying to figure out where she's going to show up again. So, it's just kind of it's another one of those, continuums.
Wow. That's cool. Wait, so what's your 20th? What's the premise of that book?
Well, I'm not totally ready to talk about it yet because I'm still in my kind of revision process, but like the final like copy editing process. So when it's done, then I'm ready to talk about it. But I will say that, it's a psychological thriller and, bad things happen.
I watched like a short, not interview, because you were just really talking, little video that you did about people, when people were asking you if you'd written your best book yet or something like that. And you were like, you always like to think that your writing gets better every single time and that your best book is always going to be your next book, which I thought was so interesting. I love that.
I do hope that's true. I do. That's like my number one driver. I've been writing a long time, and, you've had a long career, and, the things that are great, exciting, the great reviews or bestseller lists and all that, that's like, that's wonderful. And it's such a blessing to be able to have those things happen. But the thing that gets me out of bed every day is that I think I can be a better writer today than I was yesterday. I really do believe that, and I believe just in the doing of it, it makes you better every day. And so I hope always that, I feel like I'm always operating at the pinnacle of my ability at that time, right? Like there's never a moment where I've done less than I thought I could do. I'm always like heart and soul involved in what I'm doing. And so I hope, but I always hope what comes next is better, is more exciting, more involving, more, I don't know, that I'm more careful with my words, more, more in scene, more giving more to my reader. So that's definitely a major driver for me.
In your acknowledgments, you thanked your family and said it's really hard to live with a writer. So what do you think the hardest part is for them?
Oh my gosh, I'd have to ask my husband to come on to give that answer. I think it's just, my daughter is 16, and so she's grown up, like, this is all she knows is like, there are these moments where you're like, oh my God, everything's fantastic. The pages are flowing, it couldn't be better. And then there's like the days where like things are not going well and you can't get into it, and and your manuscript kicks you out, and you're like, that's it. It's wrong. It's all wrong. It can never be right, and then you're like, oh, I'm back in. And like, my husband is very good at being like, I know this is horrible. You're okay. Yeah, it's going to be okay. We know, you say this every year, right? Like, we do this every single year. And I'm like, no, this time it's really true. It's horrible and I can't fix it. And he's like, just go back up to your office. And I'm like, okay. And I go back up, and, the writing life is, it's a little bit roller coaster-y. There are these like sort of dizzying highs and these crushing lows, and, great things happen and bad things happen. And, the work is organic. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not like you have a job with a specific list of tasks and you go and you do it and then you punch out. It's like, it's always with you. It's always with you. And, and my husband and I have like worked together for a really long time. So we like to say he manages the corporation, which is like all the stuff that surrounds the business of being an author. So like, we've been doing that for a really long time, about 15 years now. And so, that's the, all the joys and wonders of working with your spouse. So, there's all that great stuff, but, and then, Ocean, my daughter, she's been on now that she's older, not so much, but when she was small, she came on every single book tour with me. And, so that would mean if it was 10 cities in, 12 days, that meant that I did that with my baby and my husband and sometimes my parents, which we always joke is like the worst entourage ever. It's like the worst entourage.
Yeah, where is Matt Dillon in this scene? You're
like, what? Are you guys not supposed to be helping me? So it would be like, my dad was there to take care of my mom so that my mom could take care of Ocean so that Jeff could take care of me and we could go out and do
my gosh, I love it.
And so it was like chaotic and crazy. And I look back and think, how did we ever do it? But, honestly, I wouldn't have done it any other way.
Oh, that's so nice. I love it. Lisa, this has been so fun. And in the back of my head this whole time, I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to put, I turned to the page to metabolize darkness, but I'm going to find a place and I'm going to send it to you when I figure it out.
Okay, perfect.
It's some swag related item.
I love that. I love that. That is really exciting.
Thank you so much. It's been really fun getting to know you, and I hope our paths cross in real life.
It's been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.